Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welker, and you are listening to episode number 83. Today is Sunday, March the 4th, Oscar Sunday. For those of you who are movie buffs out there, I'm joined by my co-host all the way in rainy, windy, nor'eastery New Jersey, Jeff Animal Wilson. Jeff, how you doing on this Sunday evening? And did you almost get blown away in that nor'easter up there?
Bill, we did not get hit as bad as Boston did. So it was okay. It was raining a lot. Had to put some buckets out in the kitchen to catch all the water. My front yard turned into a giant pond for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I don't think New Jersey got hit too bad. I mean, I can't speak for other towns in New Jersey, but definitely not as bad as Boston. So hopefully everybody over there is okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
Boston got hammered. New York, where I'm from, and where a lot of my family still lives, they're without power still in some areas, and they're not expected to get it back anytime soon. So, hopefully, everybody stayed safe out there. If you're living in that northeast area, you weren't affected too much by that. So, how's everything going otherwise, Jeff?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
All right, great summary. Uh, so, Jeff, I I'm so immersed in dad life right now. If you can't tell just by the shirt I'm wearing, uh,
It's a
so
trap, Bill.
I
It's a trap.
I was thinking about it today, and I started making a list of all the dad qualities I've acquired since actually becoming a dad, besides having a child. So things like I get mad if my leaves don't get picked up on the right day, and I spend Saturday mornings like messing with the sprinklers and cursing about how I'm wasting water. And then like I actually bought pants at Costco. Like I'm in the club, Jeff. This has gotten more serious than I thought. I didn't know it would be such a transformation. Nobody warned me of this, but I I I have assimilated into dad life, and I think booze and fighting may be all I have left. So, um, I don't know, Jeff. You're gonna have to help save me here. But speaking of booze, I want to bring this up at the start of the show. We always bring up alcohol at some point, but let's kick it off with it because I need to pour myself a drink because my throat's a little hoarse right now, and I've had a long day messing with the sprinklers and cursing about the leaves and the weeds in the backyard and all the dad stuff I've been doing. I'm exhausted, and I need a little nightcap here. So what I picked up is a bottle of Jameson Cask Mates. And for those of you who are longtime listeners of the show, when Jeff came to visit last year in December, I believe it was, we did a live episode in which we had the Cask Mates Stout Edition. What I'm holding in my hand, only those of you watching on YouTube can see, is the Cask Mates IPA Edition. So I'm going to go ahead and crack this live on the air. A little treat for the listeners here. You hear that? That was satisfying. I'm going to pour myself a little sifter here. So what they do is they take the Jameson Irish whiskey that we all know and love, that light and flavorful, vanilla-y, wonderful Irish whiskey. And this is the perfect time to enjoy Jameson because it's March, St. Patrick's Day season. So they take it and they age it in beer barrels. So in this instance, it's the IPA edition. So they take IPA barrels and they throw the whiskey in there and it kind of absorbs some of the leftover IPA residue. And what Jameson has done is partnered up with local breweries. So this glass I'm holding in my hand, for example, was aged in barrels that once contained Cigar City High Life beer, which happens to be one of my favorite all-time beers. It's a really light, drinkable IPA. It's really hop forward, but it's super refreshing at the same time. So I had a shot of this a couple of weeks ago out at a bar, but it was at the end of a long night. So let me get your reaction to everything I just said, Jeff, while I go ahead and get started on this here.
So first of all, Bill, it sounds delicious. Second off, I really like the color. Just looking at you swirling it around in there. But what do you think, Bill? Just tested it.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad that I went and got a bottle, or I might have gotten 2 bottles of this actually. They were running short at the liquor store, so I said I better grab 2. I don't know if this is going to be a limited edition kind of thing, but yeah. So it's got the regular Jameson flavor, but it's a little darker, a little deeper, and you could really kind of taste the IPA. It's basically like when you take a shot of Jameson and you chase it with your beer. You get all of that in one sip. So you could see the color is much richer. So Jameson is usually kind of yellowy, and this is more of a caramel color, I'd say. So it's a little brownish. So it really gets some of that oakiness from the barrels, and then it gets some of that citrusy hoppiness from the IPA. It's really delicious. It's nice as a shot. It's nice to sip on neat. I might do this over ice, but other than that, I wouldn't do anything else to taint it. Regular Jameson I might do with ginger ale occasionally, but I'm not big on mixers, Jeff. I like my booze to taste like booze, because that's what men do, especially after, fucking with sprinklers all weekend. So, Jeff, since you're here talking to me, I guess you're not watching the Oscars, not into the Hollywood scene, or is it just no movies you're interested in that were nominated this year, or what's the story with you and the Oscars?
So, Bill, I'm a fan of movies. I'm a fan of certain actors. I think there's a certain art to them, but I've never really cared for the Oscars. I mean, I know there are people who have viewing parties of this and yada yada yada. I'd rather watch The Walking Dead.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not big on TV. I'm not huge into movies. The kind of movies I enjoy most typically are never nominated for these kinds of awards. And I turned on the awards real quick while I was having dinner before I called you to do the show, and I saw Meryl Streep sitting front and center, and I was like, fuck it, I'm out. I can't deal with this. I'm still a little bitter, Jeff, about her speech in which she said that martial arts are not the arts. I took this very personally, Jeff, because as you know, I'm a lifelong martial artist. I think there's definitely an art form to fighting and mixed martial arts in general, which is why it's called mixed martial arts. So, Meryl Streep, if you're listening, we're not cool, all right? So, lose my fucking number. Anyway, that's enough about the Oscars and dad shit. I told you we're not turning this into a dad podcast, Jeff. So that'll be it for this week. Let's get on to some violence. So we had UFC 222 from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada last night. And this one went pretty late at night, Jeff. I think I didn't get to bed until around 2 a.m. So it was a late one, but man, it was really an action-packed card. There was a lot going on here. Let's start at the top with Christiane Cyborg Santos defending her women's featherweight title against Yana Kunitskaya, who, she had a pretty decent takedown in the first round and almost got Cyborg's back at one point, and then Cyborg just unleashed on her. Like the patient picking your shot Cyborg that fought Holly Holm was not present last night. This was a ferocious Cyborg that was looking to hurt somebody. And I think she very badly hurt a girl who, by all rights, should not have been in there. I don't think she's earned a title shot, which seems to be irrelevant in this division anyway. And she's really a bantamweight. I don't think there's any fights on her record that have been fought at featherweight. I understand, they got a pay-per-view to sell tickets for, and they, sales need to be made and the show has to go on and all that. But it's hard for me to get on board with this, Jeff, because I feel like these women are starting to be put in danger because you keep putting women who are underweight in there with Cyborg, who cuts a lot of weight to make 145 pounds. She's a very large, very strong woman. This is starting to be dangerous. And you and I were talking before we started recording, there hasn't even been a non-title fight in the women's featherweight division that you and I could remember. If anybody else can remember one, let us know. Reach out to us on social media. But I don't think there's been a non-title fight in this division, which means one, the division's empty, and two, what is the point of this division? It's just to put Cyborg on a platform, which obviously she's a very talented fighter, but it's hard to get on board with this, Jeff, when there's actually nobody else in the division. So you want to speak on your thoughts on the fight and why does this division exist? Because I can't really think of a reason.
Yeah, I think that the fight went exactly as everybody else thought it would. It was basically like throwing a salmon at a grizzly bear. Is is the only metaphor I can use here. Yana looked good for maybe 40 seconds, and then Chris Cyborg went off. The strength difference was huge, but it was interesting to see that Cyborg got taken down, I would say pretty easily. The takedown was like a little off. Yana Kunitskaya was clearly very nervous. Was like um the only metaphor I can use is when I had my prom. It was half the boys on one side of the room, half the girls on the other side of the room. Before the first dance, everybody's looking at each other. No one knows where to go, really. Everybody forgot who their date was. That's what Yana Kunitskaya looked like.
And next thing you know, you're diving at your date's ankles. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully, it didn't go that way.
No, not at all. Yeah, dude. Sadly for Yana, she just wasn't ready. The inexperience showed. She was super nervous, and Chris Cyborg just had her way with her. I think that she didn't really need all that technical stuff. Yana looked like she was done even just walking into the cage. She did not look confident at all. And I mean, you can't really blame her. I mean, what's that girl's name? Jermaine Durandamy, was avoiding this fight forever. Not a lot of people are lining up to fight Chris Cyborg here.
Yeah, not only was she avoiding the fight, she gave up her title. She was like, if I have to fight Cyborg, then I'm good. You can have this back. Like, this is a problem, Jeff. And you were looking up the roster right before we started recording here. The only other legitimate featherweight on this roster is Megan Anderson. And, she's been having injuries or whatever. You can't have a division that's made up of one woman. This just doesn't work. We've had Holly Holm, we've had Jermaine Durandamy, like we said. Amanda Nunes is probably going to be the next contender, but again, all bantamweights. There's nobody else in this division to the point where there has never been a non-title fight in the women's featherweight division. Again, if I'm leaving something out, no disrespect to any female featherweights out there, but I can't name another one. And between the two of us, Jeff, we know a fair amount about this sport. We're not experts by any means. We're just, guys who like to booze it up and watch the fights. But yeah, I mean, credit to Cyborg. She gets in there with whoever they put in front of her and she does what she has to do. But, how long can you keep feeding her these undersized girls? I don't know how the fight with Amanda Nunes will play out. Amanda has been really asking for it, which, if she thinks she can do it. I know she cuts a lot of weight to make bantamweight, so I don't know. Maybe it'll be a good fight, but if it's not, then what? There's just there's no featherweights out there. So in this case, like, do we have another Ronda Rousey situation where someone is appearing to be the best in the world just because there's no competition for the time being? What do you think, Jeff?
You pose a really good question there. I think we have to wait to see Chris Cyborg versus Megan Anderson here. I really think she's a good contender. She's a really, really good fighter. So we just gotta wait and see. But I wouldn't count out Amanda Nunes just yet because Nunes, like you said, she's a big girl. She hits pretty hard. Her ground game is pretty solid. I think she's pretty well rounded. So I really want to see that. I'd love to see that in Brazil. I know that Cyborg's a little against it, but at the end of the day, I think this fight makes a lot of money, and I think Cyborg's game for that.
Yeah, I really hope this division does work itself out because the women's MMA situation in the UFC is a bit of a clusterfuck right now. I mean, you have weight classes being created, and for the longest time we had such a huge gap between the weight classes that women weren't able to move up and down, with a few exceptions. We had Jessica Andrade move from bantamweight to strawweight, but that's a huge jump. So yeah, hopefully it works out. Credit to Cyborg. She had a really vicious highlight reel finish there over who's probably a very tough competitor. So let's move on down the card. And this fight was put together at the last minute since Max Holloway had to pull out of what was going to be the main event against Frankie Edgar. So Brian Ortega steps in on 3 weeks' notice and becomes the first man to ever finish Frankie the Answer Edgar. And he looked phenomenal. I thought Frankie looked great as well. I thought he was really light on his feet, even more so than usual. He was floating around the cage, but he just couldn't overcome the tremendous reach advantage that Brian Ortega had. And what a nasty knockout. It started with that elbow that, it seemed like the elbow he was throwing was able to match the reach of Frankie Edgar's fully extended arm. And he really whipped it into Frankie's face. And, we've seen Frankie recover in the past, but obviously, he's in his upper 30s now. So even though his cardio is still amazing, the chin is one of the first things that's going to start to fade. Now, I don't think any less of Frankie Edgar as a fighter. I think this is probably a statement that Brian Ortega is the real deal. I don't know if I was fully on his hype train before this, but there's kind of no denying him now that he's been the only man to ever stop Frankie Edgar. What were your thoughts on this one, Jeff?
Yeah, I agree. As a huge Frankie Edgar fan, I think he's one of my top 3 favorite fighters. This was a little hard to watch. Um, just I guess I kind of built this aura of invincibility around Frankie Edgar, especially in non-title fights. He's only ever lost to Gray Maynard in a non-title fight that was 3 rounds. And, before this, only 3 guys had ever beaten Frankie Edgar. But to take nothing away from Brian Ortega, he looked great in there. He looked gigantic too, man. He looked like a welterweight in there. And he even said that he weighed in at 164 the day of the fight.
Wow.
I don't know how someone gains 19 pounds in 36 hours um, effectively or healthily. Um, so I find that just a little bit fishy, but I'm no expert, so don't quote me on this. But to take nothing away from Ortega's performance, dude, he looked great. That short elbow in close range was reminiscent of John Jones and how he fought guys like Daniel Cormier,
Mm-hmm.
where he uses his elbows as punches. And Ortega just looked great, man. He looked so calm in there, like he'd done this 1,000 times before, like he'd fought, you know, top class competition before. Ortega looked great, man. He looked good all around when he grabbed Frankie by the neck because it looked like Edgar was going for a shot. Ortega grabbed Frankie's neck, and you saw how frantically Edgar wanted to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like maybe Ortega's got a really strong grip. You could tell that Frankie did not want to be there. Overall, really good performance, really good fight. And I don't think Edgar's stock goes down. I think Ortega's stock definitely shoots through the roof. And I'm kind of like you. I was not really on this hype train, but Ortega's the real deal, man.
Yeah, you kind of have to admit that now, whether you were on it or not before. And yeah, I agree. I don't think Frankie's stock goes down at all. He was supposed to get a title shot. He could have very easily sat this one out and said, no, I'm not going to fight this tough up and coming kid because I earned my title shot and I'm going to wait to get it. And I don't think anybody would blame him if he did do that. But he opted to take this young, hungry lion in Brian Ortega on 3 weeks notice and stay in the fight and stay in the show. And you have to admire him even more for that. I don't know what's next for him. I don't know if he tries to make a case for the winner of Max Holloway and Brian Ortega. Obviously Brian Ortega has to get the title shot now because he beat the guy who was going to get it last night. I think Frankie Edgar is deserving of getting back in there if he can just get one win under his belt from here, or possibly a move down to bantamweight. We know he doesn't cut a lot of weight to make 145, although he is 36 years old now. I don't know how tough that cut would be for him, but there's definitely some interesting matchups for him there. So I think you agree that what's next for Brian Ortega is a championship fight with Max Holloway. What do you see as next for Frankie Edgar?
Good question. I want to say, Kevin Lee's been talking a lot, saying how he could be some of the top guys in this division. So I say let him have a crack at it. I would love to see Kevin Lee try to take on Frankie Edgar and really prove his case here in the featherweight division.
Well, Kevin Lee's lightweight. So
my mistake. That's 155.
That would still be a great fight, I think.
So Frankie Edgar 145.
Yeah, I mean, you got Jeremy Stevens who's making a case for a title shot now. But Frankie's already beaten him, and some of the other guys in this division, we don't really know what's going on. I don't know if Clay Guida's re-signed or what, but in any case, I'm sure Frankie Edgar will be back. He'll probably have a pretty quick turnaround. Hopefully take some time off to recover. So the fight before that is a kid who they're really trying to build up because they have a great soundbite of Snoop Dogg commentating on a fight on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, which I was a fan of. I hope they bring that back. And that's Sugar Sean O'Malley, who fought Andre Sukumtat. And when I was actually texting with a buddy of mine while I was watching the fights last night, and I think I was using the voice texting, and it came up as suck some tit. So I like him for that reason. Andre sucks some tit. We can start calling him that from now on. So Sean O'Malley, almost put Sukumtat away. He really injured Sukumtat's leg early on in the fight, and then towards the end of the fight, O'Malley threw a kick that was blocked, and it appeared to break his foot, and he couldn't get up. He couldn't stand for the decision, and then he was interviewed by Joe Rogan on the ground. I kind of have mixed feelings. I do enjoy the fact that he's very marketable. He's very flashy in the cage. He throws a lot of spinning attacks, and he goes for broke. He leaves it all in the cage. His grappling skills, I don't feel like are on par with what you should have in the UFC, because Sukumtat basically gift wrapped it a couple of submissions for him. The triangle choke, for example, Sukumtat was turning to the wrong side and basically pushing himself deeper into the triangle. And for some reason, O'Malley couldn't make the adjustment to finish it there, even though it was completely locked in. And then I think there were two other submissions that he couldn't finish that were, essentially given to him. And then not getting up at the end of the fight, I feel like is a bad look. If he had snapped his ACL or something like that, but a broken bone in the foot, I feel like, come on, dude, get up and stand on your other foot and be a little more respectful of your opponent and stand next to him when you get your hand raised. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. What were your thoughts on the fight, Jeff? And you have any feelings about the laying down interview?
Yeah. So on Twitter, I posted a tweet that said Sean BJJ Blue Belt O'Malley.
I missed that one.
Yeah, dude. if you didn't go on like that tweet, you don't appreciate this fight because, yeah, dude, Sean O'Malley, his grappling
Yeah, it's just
might
not
be,
there.
yeah, yeah. I mean that triangle. I think any purple or brown belt cinches it up.
Yeah.
I think they finish with a triangle, and especially in the position he was in, he just he couldn't readjust, man. And I'm no expert. I can't do triangles because I'm a short, stockier person. But dude,
Hmm.
Sean O'Malley's got the frame for it. He's got those really long legs. Even if it had been a bad triangle, if he had locked it up the right way, even if the arm wasn't there because the arm was not in a good position, he had to bring across his body, and it was closer to. When I mean him, I mean Sukumtat's arm was closer to O'Malley's right hip instead of being across the body. But even so, if he had locked up the triangle the right way and put on a good squeeze, he could have gotten that triangle. It looked like there was a guillotine attempt too that went awry
Hmm.
because Sukumtat ended up on top of him. And Sukumtat, I feel bad for him because he's a walking meme now. Rashad Evans was very upset in the post-fight. What's that called? UFC Tonight or whatever. He was very upset that Sukumtat kept going for takedowns after seeing the leg injury, and Rashad was saying if you had just put him on the ground and then stepped away and made him get up, Sean O'Malley obviously couldn't because he was on the ground
Hmm.
even during the post-fight interview. If Andre Sumtat had stepped back, they would have called in a doctor. It would have been a doctor stoppage most likely because O'Malley couldn't get to his feet.
Yeah, I was confused by that too because if you can't get off your stool in between rounds, then that's a TKO. Now, if you can't stand up at the end of the fight, I almost feel like that should be the same thing because it in a real life fighting situation, if you can't stand up, then you lose. So I don't understand. Maybe that's something they can adjust in the rules, but if you can't stand up when that third bell rings, then you wouldn't be able to answer a fourth round had there been one. So maybe that's something to look at in the rules. I don't know, but he is big for that division. He's 5'11" at 135 pounds, and obviously at only 23 years old, he's gonna grow into his body a little bit more and probably move up a weight class. But there are some fun fights for him. His striking is a fun style. He has one of those styles where he tries to knock people out and doesn't really seem to have any regard for getting knocked out, which makes for an exciting fighter. And he's got Snoop Dogg's blessing for whatever that's worth. So, okay, cool. Sean O'Malley. Moving on, Andrei Arlovsky and Stefan Struve. At the end of this fight, I really had no idea who won, and my feed was kind of cutting out in the middle of it. And Adelaide Bird was one of the judges, I think. So at the end of this thing, I was so fucking confused. And if I didn't know who would win, and Adelaide Bird is in there, like uh, I wouldn't have been surprised if they declared Joe Rogan the winner. So what were your thoughts on this fight, Jeff, between Arlovsky and Struve?
Yeah, the Arlovsky fight, I thought he was the deserved winner. I thought he did a good job of getting inside Stefan Struve, um, surpassing that reach advantage. And Stefan Struve, man, Bill, in Spanish, we have this saying, um, grande para nada, which means big for nothing. It means that you got all this size, but you can't do anything with it. You're not strong. And I feel like Stefan Struve is a little man trapped in a big man's body. He doesn't know how to use his reach. He's God, it's just like, dude, I'm upset. No disrespect to Andrei Arlovsky. He's a tough dude. I love him to death. He's been
Mm-hmm.
he's been fighting almost as long as the UFC has been in existence.
Yeah.
But man, Stefan Struve, his arms are probably longer than my body, dude. Like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I think Grande para nada should be the title of this episode. I think that is awesome. Yeah, I wasn't that into this fight, to be honest. So Let's move on. Kellen Vieira had a pretty dominant performance over Kat Zingano, which I think would probably surprise a lot of people. Yet again, Adelaide Bird was in there, who, for those who don't know, who don't watch any boxing, Adelaide Bird is the reason that Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez fought to a draw last August or September, I believe it was. I think it was August. A fight which Gennady Golovkin clearly won, according to even people who know nothing about boxing. And Adelaide Bird, who has judged hundreds and hundreds of professional combat sports events, scored the fight for Canelo. And she proved again last night that she either gets paid off or she just doesn't know enough to do this. And Joe Rogan had a great line where he was saying, oh, how did they let Adelaide Bird do this? And John Anik said, I've met her once and she's actually a really lovely person. She's really nice. And Joe Rogan said, yeah, so is my mom, but I wouldn't want her judging fights. and that he nailed it. I mean, yeah, she probably is a really nice person, but judging fights is not something she's good at, and she shouldn't be allowed to do it. I don't know why there's no repercussions for this. She scored the fight for Kat Zingano when it was a very clear victory for Caitlin Vieira, and Joe Rogan was taking some digs at the judging all night long. I think he's pretty fed up with it, and I'm kind of in the same boat, Jeff. What were your thoughts on this fight, and what were your thoughts on the split decision?
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. Zingano, the only round she won was the third round, and that one could probably be a toss-up as well. I think Vieira did really well, and as much as I love Kat Zingano, she lost the first two rounds easy. Yeah, yeah. Some of these judges, man, but Adelaide Bird in specifically, she has botched up fights before. To go back to that Triple G versus Canelo Alvarez fight, if anybody listening has seen that fight, I don't think you need to be much of a boxing expert. I mean, I don't really follow boxing, and I figured out pretty quickly who won that fight. So, but anyway, I'm just glad that it didn't ruin the result or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's that. I think this card set the record for most split decisions in UFC pay-per-view history, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, or do. It's not going to really affect me either way. So let's go to another split decision. It was the UFC debut of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu phenom Mackenzie Dern. And Jeff, I had you check out a little video after last week's episode. I wanted to bring this up. So tell me what you thought about Mackenzie Dern's post-fight speech with Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Bill, I thought it was awesome. It was interesting how it started off with a Brazilian accent and ended in a Midwestern accent. like Mackenzie Dern it's just funny. It's like one of those people who goes to London for 2 weeks and then they come back and they ask you if they can use your loo. Get out of here. Come on.
Yeah, bro. She went full Madonna. Like, so for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, just go to YouTube and type in Mackenzie Dern accent, and you'll find a phenomenally produced video. I wish I knew who made it originally, but I don't think the most popular one is actually the person who created the video. I would love to give credit for this because it's hilarious, because it shows Mackenzie Dern. So Mackenzie is probably one of the whitest names. It's got to be top 15 in as far as white girl names goes. So she's from Arizona, I believe. Very nice girl, very pleasant. An amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, multi-time world champion, very high-level black belt. And in the beginning of the YouTube video, I think it starts at like 2011, somewhere around there. She's just giving a normal interview. Sounds pretty much like a girl version of me. And then by the end of this thing, she sounds like she grew up in Brazil, like she was a little girl raised in the favelas. of Sao Paulo or something. And the best the best thing you pointed out, Jeff, was that they brought in a translator
Oh God, I forgot about
during
that.
the
Yeah.
post-fight interview, who was former UFC fighter George Gurzel. And Joe Rogan asked the question, and George looked at Mackenzie like, "Did you get that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I got it." Because you grew up speaking English.
Oh,
That's why
God.
you understood. Like, I'm sure her Portuguese sounds lovely, but for sure, no need for the accent. In any case, kind of a messy performance here by Mackenzie Dern in her debut. And, her striking is pretty wild. Obviously, anyone in the top 10 of this division would piece her up on the feet easily. Forget about putting in her with a Joanna Jędrzejczyk or a Rose Namajunas or, Karolina Kovacevic, or really like sniper strikers that you have in that division. She would have a really hard time. And then when she tried to get the fight to the ground, she had a hard time with that too. She looked pretty good in the clinch. When she landed, it looked like she was hitting hard, but she wasn't really setting up her strikes. She was just kind of throwing wild and rushing in there, trying to close the distance because I guess she would feel at a disadvantage from range. But overall, I think the UFC has something good here. She's a very attractive girl. She's, competed at the highest level in jiu-jitsu across the world. She's got some serious grappling skills. There could be some interesting matchups for her there, but if she goes in there with someone with great takedown defense and really clean striking, she's going to be in a world of trouble. What were any other thoughts on this fight, Jeff?
Yeah, this fight was madness, for lack of a better term. Mackenzie Dern, dude, she was just throwing these crazy strikes, no head movement. Every time she threw one hand, the other was down, so there was a chance of her getting knocked out with a counter punch or something. But I mean, it was okay.
Yeah, that's all you can say about it. It was okay. So impressive performance. Alexander Hernandez also making his UFC debut. Doesn't let Beneil Dariush get out of the first minute of that fight with a nasty knockout. So Beneil Dariush, I feel like, is a guy who had a lot of hype behind him when he was first coming up, and then hit some bumps in the road. Dangerous fight for him, taking on a newcomer because we don't really know what to expect from people making their debut. And I feel like this probably set Beneil Dariush back a lot. But it was a great fight for Alexander Hernandez making his debut with a bang, so to speak. Any thoughts on this one, Jeff?
Yeah, but I was really impressed with Hernandez's movement and footwork. Excuse me. He was switching stances a lot, which was really cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell that Beneil Dariush was just not ready for it. Because the knockout punch, Dariush slipped to his right, which is what you do. It's the right movement when you're fighting against someone who's orthodox, because it puts you out of the way of both that punch and a follow-up cross. However, when you're going up against a southpaw, which Hernandez was in the southpaw stance, if you slip the shot and you move to your right, you're right in the way of a left cross, which obviously you're not going to get from someone who stands orthodox. So Dariush, it looked like he was a little unprepared for this fight. As opposed, maybe he didn't spar with too many southpaws. He wasn't used to that movement. But to not take anything away from Hernandez, that he looked really cool in there for the 42 seconds that we saw from him.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely be excited to see him back in there. I imagine he'll have a quick turnaround after only fighting for 42 seconds. The only other fight I want to touch on, Jeff, because I feel like the rest of the undercard was not very eventful. CB Dalloway and Hector Lombard, which was a pretty competitive fight for the first round. But what happened was the bell rang to end the first round, and then CB Dalloway let his guard down, and Hector Lombard hit him with a 1-2 and knocked him out cold. basically, and Dalloway could not continue the fight. It was ruled as a win for CB Dalloway due to a disqualification. Now, it was a little bit weird, and I don't know why there's not more controversy behind this, because you should be protecting yourself until the referee steps in, because, you know, some guys might be hard of hearing or your adrenaline's going, you don't hear the horn. Now, I do think Hector heard it, and then he hit CB Dalloway anyway, and then he turned and walked away and kind of back looked him like, yeah, that's right, you son of a bitch. And yeah, not a cool move by Hector Lombard, very unsportsmanlike. But at the same time, you got to protect yourself until you're in your corner or until a referee steps in there. I don't think Hector had to reach over Mark Smith, the referee, to land those punches. He definitely shouldn't have done it, but yeah, for sure, don't just let your guard down when you hear the horn, because your opponent might not hear it, especially if you're in there with like a Matt Hamill, for example, who can't physically hear the horn. You know, you got to wait for the referee to get in there or until you're a safe distance away before you let your guard down. What were your thoughts on this, Jeff?
Yeah, but a lot of people are throwing a fit about this one, saying that it was 2 punches that Lombard threw after the bell. I disagree. I think the first one, I think you can kind of let him get away with, because it looked like the bell was ringing as he was throwing the punch. The second one, definitely a little bit after the bell. However, I think the ref is at fault here, Bill, because the ref, yeah, he's yelling, he's saying time, he's saying stop, he yells it twice, but it's the referee's job to get in there and grab Hector Lombard and protect CB Dalloway. Um, what I'm not saying that lets Lombard off the hook for this, but I think that the ref could have taken a few measures to prevent that second shot. And if Lombard had thrown it while the ref grabbed him, that's a whole different story. I don't think there's any argument. I think it's a DQ, but I think there were a lot of moving parts here that just kind of aligned at the wrong time. So I don't know if this could have been avoided, but I think that there could have been some measures that could have been better taken for the situation.
Yeah. In any case, right call, because I think intent is irrelevant. You know, it was done and it was wrong, and he got disqualified and good. So probably won't be seeing Hector Lombard or CB Dalloway anytime soon. And Dalloway was coming from a pretty lengthy layoff. So that's all I got for this card, Jeff, unless you want to touch on anything else.
Nah.
All right.
John Dodson was on here, but he had the most boring fight of his career.
Yeah, I think he's done that a couple of times, and I feel like he's trying to make a statement, but I can't really get on board with it. I forget what the statement even was, but I remember he did it on purpose one time where he had a boring fight where he just outpointed the guy on purpose, and he did it for a reason. But I don't know, Jeff. When people protest, I tend to tune out. So yeah, don't do that. Don't do that shit. So we're off the hook for next week, Jeff. Like I was saying before we started recording, we got a week off from this job here. That's not a job. If it was a job, this would be a pretty amazing job. You know, if we just got paid to drink booze and talk about fighting, this would be pretty awesome. I wouldn't mind doing this every day. But the next time we're going to see any UFC action is going to be St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. And that's Fight Night 127 from the O2 Arena in London. And it's headlined by Fabricio Verdum and Alexander Volkov. Now, I feel like Verdum, you know, he's up there. I think he's still ranked number 2 or 3 in the heavyweight division. Cain Velasquez might be ranked above him, but I feel like he keeps taking these really dangerous fights that he doesn't necessarily have to. You know, he stepped up and took a fight against Marcin Tybura, you know, young and up and coming fighter. You have to respect Verdum for you know, taking a fight against absolutely anybody, anywhere. I mean, he's fought all over the world. He's stayed very active for a heavyweight. Co-main event, Jimmy Manuwa and Jan Blachowicz. And the card kind of falls apart there. Stevie Ray is in there somewhere against K. John Johnson. That should actually be a really good fight. That's probably the sleeper fight I would choose. But other than that, not a whole lot going on here, Jeff. Change my mind if you got it pulled up in front of you.
You're asking a lot of me, Bill. I don't, man, I can't get excited over this one either. Just Jimmy Manua. I like Jimmy Manua. Verdum versus Volkov looks pretty good. And Bill, I disagree. Actually, I don't think he's taking dangerous fights. I think he's the dangerous fight in a lot of these situations. Man, his grappling is ridiculous. Probably one of the best in the heavyweight division,
Mm-hmm.
and his striking has come a long way, man. I wouldn't want to fight Verdum anywhere.
Yeah.
On the feet, on the ground, he's dangerous. So I feel like he's got a really good shot here. And I think he's trying to make his way back to the heavyweight title after DC takes care of after Stipe takes care of some business with Daniel Cormier. But I'm in the same boat, man. I can't really get into this one.
Yeah. So let me just clarify. I don't mean it's dangerous for the fact that he could lose it. It's dangerous for the fact that he's so high in the rankings. He has nothing to gain by fighting these guys, and he has everything to lose. Because if he were to lose to Volkov, he gets knocked down the ladder. But if he wins, he pretty much stays in the same position. So we can get, you know what? Let's do a little research this week. Let's watch some tape on some of these more lesser known fighters. And let's come back with a fresh opinion because I want to get excited for this, especially with a 1 week layoff. You got anything else for this week, Jeff?
Actually, Bill, one last thing. I have a movie for you since we've been talking about the Oscars.
Let's do it.
And Bill, I've been trying to help you out a little bit with Spanish. I've been a little bit lazy with it, but there's this movie called Y tu mamá también. It means and your mom too. So, excuse me.
All right.
So, it's basically a coming of age tale. It's about these two young kids. They're in high school. They're about to go off to college in like a year or two, and they just hang out over the summer. And they decide to take a road trip to impress a girl, basically. So them two and this girl, the three of them, go on a road trip to this beach that's like on the other side of Mexico. So these guys live in Mexico. Um, Really good movie, man. The message at the end is pretty cool. It's just, enjoy life no matter what stage you're at, no matter who you're with. So, really cool movie. It's all in Spanish. You can find it on Netflix. And this movie it came out when I was in like middle school, and it's won a couple of awards. It's one of those it's like one of those movies you'd see at like a Sundance or something. So it won't have anybody like super famous, but it's a really good movie. There's some, what do you call it, like dialect in there, some words that I didn't even understand in Spanish because I'm not Mexican. Uh, so I think you'd enjoy that movie. It's pretty cool.
Cool. As long as it has subtitles, I think I can get on board with this. I do want to keep brushing up on my Spanish, Jeff. And we'll start with Grande para nada, which is what we're gonna call this episode now. I like that one. That's my new favorite phrase. I think I'm gonna start using that one probably when it's not relevant to the situation I'm in at all. All right, so we're gonna call it here because we can reconvene next week on UFC Fight Night 127. Dive a little deeper into that, and who knows, maybe some news will come up. Maybe we'll actually talk about like something Conor McGregor does. I think we're probably one of the only podcasts that never talks about him because he's not fighting. And if you're not fighting, we don't talk about you because even though I just contradicted myself by mentioning him, but I only did so I could bring up the fact that we don't talk about him. In any case, if you want to follow us on social media and let us know if we were wrong about anything, like, no non-title fights in the featherweight division or Jameson Caskmates being delicious, by all means, we love hearing that we're wrong. We love hearing that we're right. I loved all the positive feedback on the video promo I released last week. So thank you everybody for that. If you're not already subscribed, you know where to find the podcast. If you want to watch on YouTube, we're on YouTube as well. Please leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you happen to be listening. If you want to get a hold of Jeff, it's at @animal_Wilson on Twitter. And of course, you guys know how to get a hold of me. It's at MMA on the Rocks, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, MMAonTheRocks@gmail.com. If you want to send me an email, I'm very friendly in real life. I promise. Until next time, cheers, everybody. Goodbye.